tell you what, I'll just get into each of these as we go. So in the 70s in particular, the reason you weren't supposed to smoke pot was because it will rot your brain. I'm not exactly sure what brain rot was supposed to mean, but it usually meant like maggots were going to suck your head out, right? I mean, somehow pot was going to do that. What we did see was an initial report that said folks who've used cannabis have larger ventricles, bigger holes in their brains, than folks who don't. Okay. The first study was, first of all, flawed in so many ways it was ridiculous. Had the folks who used cannabis and the folks who not, both were measured. Here's how they measured the ventricle size. They sucked all your fluid out of your spine and said, oh, there's more fluid here. They must have bigger holes. Not the best measure we have available today, thank God. And stunner, gee, the folks who smoked pot had also done a whole lot of other drugs. Duh. All right. When it was first published, it was all over the news. Marijuana, big holes in your head, ah! Right. Replicated with MRI, well, with PET scans, which were the big thing at the time. Couldn't find it. Couldn't find the big holes in the heads of folks who smoked pot and only pot. Did the media go, oh, hey, we were wrong. New study, no differences. No. So at least for folks who start cannabis use in adulthood, there are actually no data to support the idea of structural changes in the brain. The teen data were scarier, not replicating perfectly, but the big study was the proportion of white and gray matter in the brain was off in folks who started heavy use before age 18. Heavy use in your teenage years is not recommended. Duh. All right? Does it actually lead to deviant brain structure? We're not crystal clear. At least one study suggests that's the case. Okay? They did it with MRIs. Basically, the percent of gray matter was lower, percent of white matter was higher. That proportion is supposed to be a certain optimal range, allegedly because what's going on in white matter? What would make brain structure white? Myelin, all right? Myelin is that nice fat that goes around the neuron to help. Right? The action potential can move faster. Right? You'd like to have a lot of that white matter. I thought, hey, more white matter sounds good to me. But in fact, they assert at least there's an ideal proportion. And that would mean a more efficacious brain, if you will, more efficient brain. Right? It wasn't the case, at least in those who started before age 17. This at least has one time failed to replicate. We'll see how the rest of the data goes. Acute effects on memory, we talked about it last time. Okay. Getting high is just not the way to learn something new quickly. But it makes practicing guitar so much better. Okay. Okay. What have we seen? Some curious things with function, but not structure. All right. All of these come from Nadia Solowidge's lab. She's down in Australia. She's a real anti-pot. All right. And she's made a career out of this. All right. Which will get folks who've used every day for 2 years or more. All right. Which in parts of Australia, that's not hard to find. They get these deviant evoked potentials I talked about before, but basically the big idea is there are brain waves in response to rare events, in response to certain stimuli. Don't distinguish between relevant and irrelevant as well as the brain waves of folks who didn't smoke pot every day for 2 years. Yeah. Some recovery with abstinence, okay, she's only done some individual cases, but she'll have some people come in, they'll do this, they'll take 30 days off, and the brain waves get better. Isn't that compelling evidence? Wouldn't that motivate you to quit? Because your brain waves on this one task would get better? The problem is it doesn't translate into a whole lot of real practical problems. What are the recommendations for recreational users? The real recommendation is make smoking pot an event. Smoking pot should be something special. All right, like sex. You can't do it all the time or it's just not special. Okay. Smoke less. Okay. Are you actually attending to effects? Or are you just like, oh, well, we got a gram, we got to smoke the whole gram? Choose a time. Okay. There could be a moment when it's a good time to smoke pot. There might be a moment where it's not so good. Driving to the DMV is not the best time to get high. Oh, it's Friday night and it's 9:30 and we're going to watch a bunch of cartoons. Maybe that's a better one. Focusing on the effects. Okay, I wrote a whole chapter on this. If you're going to pay attention, if we're going to talk about how mindfulness is great about getting you into the now, like we did last time, wouldn't that be an ideal time to do so? Right. Enjoy yourself. Combat automaticity. Friday, must smoke pot. Right? If there's this robotic use that's just a reflex, question that. Saturday, party, must toke. Right? Really? And in fact, what will happen, more mindful of use, dosages go down, some of your tolerance decreases, you got more pot at the end of the month. It's a wild money-saving device. Mindfulness, it can lower your pot bill. What do I recommend for medical users? Again, smoking less. It's curious because, especially for the insomnia folks, we're seeing a lot of tolerance related to dosage. If dosage stays low, tolerance doesn't seem to be an issue at all. Right? But if you have dosage too high, you really do develop tolerance more rapidly. So, a friend of mine in Vermont who has a relatively big medical practice with cannabis, his patients will say, oh yeah, right before bed I do a great big bowl of hash. And he'll say, don't do so much. The doctor told me not to smoke hash. But why? Because you only need enough to help you sleep. Oh, well, I'm going to be really stuck. You're going to be asleep. Right? You're not going to enjoy it. I'm going to get these wild insights in my sleep. No. Right? Focus on the alleviation of symptoms. What is the symptom that's going to be treated? Right? Is there pain? Monitor. Okay. Can I start with the smallest dose possible, give it some time to actually kick in, and then see where the symptoms are, rather than, oh, my finger hurts, I need to smoke a gram. Right? This is what has hurt the medical movement, right? So somebody relatively famous just said 80% of the medical marijuana market in California is really just adult recreational use. Okay? And people with like nausea and vomiting and like serious medical conditions really got pissed off. Right? But in fact, if you're going to be a medical user, then by all means, check symptoms. Combat automaticity, same deal. Self-monitor. How hard is it to have a little notebook? Here's how much I smoked, and here's how I felt. Here's how much I smoked, and here's how I felt. Here's how much I smoked, and here's how I felt. Okay? And then you find out, wow, I don't need a gram every day. All right, driving. This is going to be the hottest issue this year and for years to come. Okay. And you're going to hear me say this right now. don't drive high. Why? It's a fucking buzzkill. Okay? It's not fun to parallel park high. It's not fun to wonder, is that car behind me a cop? It's not fun to be on a large street going, I'm never going to find a fucking parking space when you're high. Right? What do the data say? It's really, really confused. If we go all the way back to the 80s, it actually looks like cannabis users were less likely to cause accidents than folks who didn't smoke pot. Right? Primarily because they drive like they're high. Right? How do drunk people drive? I can drive. Fucking get out of my way. Oh, is that a stop sign? Shit. How do high people drive? Dude, there's a stop sign. You can pull all the way up. It's okay. So, what kind of research can we do? We can actually get people high and have them drive. Jonathan, what happens with that?
An actual video of they gave people certain amounts of marijuana and tested them, how they drive.
That was making the rounds just about a month ago, right? And how did they do?
It's hysterical, but a moderate amount, they actually weren't that bad. But too much, they started getting sick.
Sure. And they'll even say, like, dude, I'm way too high to drive. Right? And Roby, who we're going to talk about later, it's in Amsterdam, so he can get them really high. And he'll say, okay, now we're going to drive. And they say, you mean outside? I'm like, dude, I'm way too fucking high to drive, right? And he makes them drive anyway. So first and foremost, don't drive high because it's a bummer, but also you know. Right? Could we have recommendations? Well, there are recommendations for Marinol. THC, like, by the way, be careful driving with this. Right? The opiates, same deal. Right? You get Vicodin when you have your fucking tooth extraction, and what's on the side of the bottle says, don't fucking drive with this shit. Right? Antihistamines. Okay, fucking Benadryl, 50 milligrams, 2 of those little pink ones. Dude, I can't fucking drive because I'm asleep. Right? Really, really dangerous. And we've got compelling data to show staying in the center of the lane on 2 Benadryl is fucking all people can do. Like, oh. Alright? Do we make Benadryl illegal? Is Benadryl Schedule 1 now? Alright, so let's keep that in mind. What have we seen in Roby's data? This must have sucked. I think they did it in Maastricht, not in Amsterdam. But they had to get in the car with it was those 2-seater cars like with the driver's ed guy. Right, so he's got a brake too. And a steering wheel, I think. But he can at least put the brakes on. Right? What are they not so good at? That lateral movement. Staying right down the center of the lane. Okay, and it's more automatically controlled, right? It's kind of hard. You got to really focus, right? And then there's a dude sitting right next to you, so that's a whole other layer of complexity. Right? But they're fine with the handling. They're turning scores that do that left turn and the right turn like you did on the traffic exam. You guys all have driver's licenses? So I went to college in Manhattan, like half of us had driver's licenses. And all the maneuvering was fine. Right? But that staying in the center of the lane was a real problem.